going to talk about the water board permits that there's a draft right now that's before the water board, and there's a hearing next week where the board is going to vote on it. And that's what I want to talk about, because I think it's important we're all aware of what's happening with this permit. So it's the LA Water Board. They're the entity responsible for writing and enforcing the permits regulating the water migrating off the site. And the intent of these permits is to protect the public from health hazards in the water. So this new permit that's going to be voted on next week will be in effect until 2020. So it's important that the community is aware of what's happening. Why do we care about the water? Well, Santa Susana is on the top of a hill. So logically, when it rains, all the radioactive and chemical contamination that is getting into the soil near the water can run off down the hill into multiple locations. Here's a picture of the water going off. Water's running where? Well, it's running into a number of areas, partially into Bell Creek, which is the headwaters for the LA River. It's also running in our area over here in Simi towards Arroyo Simi, Runkle Canyon, and Dayton Canyon. What are the issues with the new permit? First, we want the community to be aware that we have some concerns about the transparency and the accessibility that the Water Board has been given to the public. I'll talk about that in a minute. And the old permit was weak to begin with, and it actually expired April 10th of last year. And this new permit, I will explain to you in detail, is even less protective of public health. So what's the issue with transparency? If you didn't want the public to see a new permit, if you had something to hide, you'd probably take a couple of actions. So what have they done? Well, they took 14 months to write the new permit and gave the public only 30 days, over the holidays no less, to provide public feedback. And the proposed permit and requests for comments wasn't even posted on their website as recently as a couple of days before the comments were due. What else? They called the new permit a reissuance. Well, a reissuance sounds pretty, harmless, but if you read the fine print, you'd find many things changed and not in the public's favor. So I had called the Water Board saying, look, you really want me to read this 180-page document line by line and compare it to the other one? Are you kidding me? Is there a list of changes? No, there was no list of changes. So if any public person wanted to really understand what the new permit was compared to the old one, they had to spend several days, hours, I don't know, it was a long time going through it. So it's a concern. If they're keeping Boeing's application for permit renewal secret, you wonder, is there a situation where there's a backroom deal between the polluter and the regulator? So how do they regulate the water? How do we know what's happening with the water? How does the permit work? One of the things I wanted to explain was about the outfalls. There are 19 and now hopefully 20 outfalls. They are located all over the site, some on the perimeter, some inside, and they test the water. Oh, it does come up. Okay, so how about that? I'm going to show you on this fancy slide that I didn't make. The different outfalls are going to come up number by number and show you how many violations. What's a violation? That means it's exceeded the amount that the permit has said is safe for the public. So isn't this kind of cool? All right, they're going to pop up. 38, I want you to look at that one specifically, because that one is the one that bothers me a lot. Okay, so they're all over. It equals 216 exceedances since 2008. That's a lot. And this 38 on top, that's right by the Brandeis Bardeen Institute. There's a picture of the kids. I went there a few times, and that really is bothersome to me, thinking that the water's going off 38 times. We know that it's exceeded what the LA Water Board said was safe, and it's going right into this children's camp. So what else do we want to tell you tonight? Not only do we feel that the Water Board hasn't been transparent, we also didn't like the old permit. It was too weak. One of the issues was it's only taking one sample annually for the radioactive contaminants. Well, in 2012, the EPA did a $40 million study of the site, and they found 500 areas of radioactivity, and that's just in Area 4. And so one sample annually doesn't seem like enough. It also establishes non-enforceable benchmarks. If they use numerical limits, they're enforceable, but if they use benchmarks, they're not. And it eliminates requirements that both grab and composite samples be taken. What else? The new permit, so we didn't like the old one, now let's talk about the new one. So instead of making it more protective for the public, they've made it less, up to 4 times more contamination per day. And I messed up on this, but at some of the outfalls, the limits have changed, not for the better of the public. Mercury, for example, we all know mercury is not good for people. That's changed from 0.2 pounds to 0.7 pounds per day, which is 3 times more. This is an amazing level of oil and grease has increased in the allowable amount from 1 ton to 4 tons per day. Boron increased from 148 to 537, and the nitrate limit increased from about 2,000 to about 5,000. This is just a partial list, but these numbers are not in our favor. The permit also eliminates monitoring and compliance requirements for acute toxicity. Acute toxicity means that it's something that kills you instantly versus chronic, so that's something we'd want to keep in. And the requirements for monitoring for radioactivity have been changed in a fashion that weakens them. Also, the outfalls 12, 13, and 14 were taken away. These outfalls were tested 17 times since 2008 and found to have 15 violations. So I don't know any good reason to take them out when they're still finding exceedances there. They've eliminated monthly average pollution limits, and they're not sampling frequently enough. So here's the times that they were sampling going back historically, and you can see the numbers over time are going way down. So one has to scratch your head a little bit and say, you know, what's going on here? Why are they hiding the ball? Why are they not being transparent? And why is this new permit less protective? Is there anything to suspect? You may find this quite shocking, but the head of the LA Water Board also is principal and general counsel at an organization called Renewable Resource Group, and that's an organization Boeing has hired to make people less interested in cleaning up the site. You may have heard about Consumer Watchdog. They are an organization that did an expose on this situation, Boeing lobbyists having influence on the DTSC, the Toxics Regulatory Agency, and the Water Board. And this expose says Boeing hired this firm and Stringer in part to establish an astroturf group, astroturf being fake grass, so it's a term for a fake grassroots organization, to push Boeing's line that cleaning up the majority of the contamination at Santa Susana is undesirable. So we've got, just to summarize this, we've got the head of the LA Water Board working for Boeing. Tracy Egoscue was also a former director of the Water Board, and she left after signing off on a secret deal with Boeing to then go work for Boeing's lawyer. So there's been some funny business at the Water Board. Why is this important? Well, it comes down to public health, of course, and what contaminants are being found in the water. So here's a chart, and then I'm going to show you, it goes 2 pages here, so I won't go line by line, but a lot of these things that they're finding in the water are not good. So let's take 50 hits of dioxin, the first one. Dioxin causes reproductive, developmental, immunological, and endocrine effects. And Lead, 27 hits of lead. Well, we all know lead's not good, but I'll read this list to you anyway. Learning disabilities, infertility, cancer, increased risk of heart attacks. So we do not want these in the water. What about the groundwater? The water permit doesn't relate to the groundwater, but it's important to know that in order for Boeing to comply with these permits, they need to be cleaning up the site. And there's issues not just with the water at these outfalls, but also with what's going and seeping into the ground. This is a chart. Now, I've been doing this for 5 years, and I was shocked to be studying this week as I was getting ready to speak to you. I had never seen this, or at least I hadn't paid attention, honestly. And this pink blob going up and to the right here, that is going off the property up into Woolsey Canyon. That is a known plume of TCE. So we know that that's going off the site. And what about perchlorate? I understand they're starting a development in Dayton Canyon where grading has begun. Well, we know perchlorate is there. Perchlorate has also been found in monitoring and drinking wells in Simi. And it's been found, well, it's outfall 8 into Dayton Canyon. Years ago, it was found in the stream bed, not in the water, but in the soil. It's an amazing number. 62 million parts per billion of perchlorate was found in Dayton Canyon. So how does the LA Water Board work in terms of regulating Boeing? They have this permit. They've had 216 violations. Well, surely they should have been fined, right? Well, they do establish fines, but I'm not confident that they're working. So over the years, this goes back to 2002, there's a couple big hits. You can see there was a couple years where they had almost $500,000 in fines. But if you average it out, it's about $1.5 million. Boeing brings in $80 billion per year. If their fines are averaging $100,000, that's about 1/1,000,000th of their revenue. Or for the average family, it's about 6 cents. Well, you're going to find that in the couch, you know. I mean, this is not a lot of money. So here's my conclusion for today. The new permit would subject our community until 2020 to a weaker permit than the existing weak permit. With the head of the LA Water Board, this is this guy Charlie Stringer, also working for Boeing, there's reason to be concerned about undue influence. Now, he's going to recuse himself, but even if your boss recuses himself, don't you think he's got some influence? Contaminated water runs off the site an average of 35 times annually, and the fines aren't stopping Boeing from violating the permit. So we are letting you know that we would request people attend the hearing next week, and I encourage you to speak up. Thank you.
Okay.